I'm Tiffany Rosenbaum, and I'm the host of At Home Money. I help moms start their own dream side hustles and businesses, and one way I do that is through sharing successful female led business stories like the one you're about to hear today. If you want to learn more about working with me or any of the guest speakers, please check out the links in the description. Let's meet today's guest, Nichole DeMario with Send Media Company. Hi, Nichole. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited to finally get to chat with you about everything that it is that you do. You are such a busy woman and just right up my alley because so am I.
How
But
many emails did it take to schedule this?
way too many. So, first off, tell us a little bit about what you do and how many businesses you run and what that looks like.
On any given day, there are three running with about half a dozen or more floating around in my head of how do I make this happen? Who do I pull in and partner with so that I can make happen? But core companies are Send Media, which is the media company that houses two publications, Mom to Mom magazine and Woman to Woman magazine, which I am the editor in chief and publisher of. Then there is Storied Elements. I am the founder as well as lead consultant, and we focus on change management communications
Okay.
for a variety of different companies and organizations, focusing more so in the corporate space. And then there is Wonderlane Events, the latest venture, which kind of pulls a little bit of everything together. We are a family fest market focused company, and I'm CEO of that. I have a fabulous business partner, Ashley Franklin, who actually started the company in a different capacity. And it's a really great opportunity to partner with my media company as well and bring everything along for the journey.
Yes. For my listeners, you may know what she's talking about because we featured Ashley on episode 2 or 3. So that's so wonderful to bring it all full circle. You had mentioned something that I think a lot of people might know what that is. And can you tell us a little bit about what change management is and what that means? Because that's a term that a lot of people probably don't know what that means.
Sure. I feel like it's one of those $2 words that is very buzzy in the business space right now. But essentially, what change management is, I'll use the phrase that I just used, bringing everyone along for the journey. So, a lot of times, companies and organizations are implementing some sort of change, usually positive. It's not a reduction in force. Oftentimes, it's a system change or an organizational change. And those that are leading that effort want to make sure that they're taking everyone into consideration. So, where I come in is an outside source to figure out where the pain points are, figure out what people aren't sure about, and helping build out this really robust communications plan that's customized to each particular stakeholder group. So, those stakeholder groups could be teams or departments, and that means that it could be that they need a really solid set of meetings from leadership, and they need to hear all the ins and outs of a particular change. Or it might mean that they need training and they need to better understand how their day to day is going to be impacted. And why a lot of companies opt to use consultants is it can feel a little bit better. Oftentimes, people can be a little bit more open versus talking to their boss or maybe
Yeah.
their boss's boss. And for me, they'll just like lay it all out there, and they'll kind of kick their feet back and say, I hate this, or this is stressing me out, or am I going to lose my job? And all these sorts of things. And they can kind of open up, and I can dissect it all, package it together, and hopefully put it all together in a neat little bow, and make people feel really confident and comfortable and be able to embrace that change.
That's awesome. I didn't even know that was a thing or that it existed. How did you get into doing that and how long have you been doing it?
So when I first got out of college, my degree's in broadcast journalism. The market, the really, a little bit of everything was just tanking. And I decided, okay, if I'm going to explore journalism, then I need something to fall back on. And I went through kind of the rigmarole of figuring out what that looked like and backed into communications. So I
Yeah.
became the director of communications for an organization. that, had a pretty big footprint. And one of the things that I was tasked with pretty much on a quarterly, if not annual basis, was this sort of change implementation. I didn't know that's what it was called at the time, but we
Mm-hmm.
were constantly doing things for our members. It was a member organization. And I was like, I like, this is really interesting. I like this. I like the, constant change. I like being able to troubleshoot and problem solve. And once I kind of maxed out the potential of that role, thankfully the CEO of that company really understood that I wanted to grow, and I probably wouldn't be there, for the remainder of my working years. And so, he would make different recommendations of, where I could go from there. And so from there, I kind of did a little bit of side work. I was still working there. I did some consulting work from other organizations just to kind of test out the waters. I did a brief stint at a couple startups, again, just trying to navigate networking, building a rapport. And then I finally landed with a boutique consulting firm that was doing exclusively change management.
Yeah.
And that's when I learned about, all these different processes and programs, and that there were phrases like change management, and I fell in love with it. It's not for everyone because you often work sort of contract to contract. It can be
Yeah.
fairly stressful, because your job and, your coworkers and the company even is constantly changing.
Yeah.
So for me, it just felt right. It kind of tapped into the way my brain works, and then landed at a couple different firms. So that's pretty normal in, the consulting space, to kind of bounce between firms, as the work is there. And then eventually I was like, I think I can do this. I think I could build a team of people. I can apply all the things that I've learned, and partner with organizations myself, sort of on I'll call it full-time basis.
Yeah.
And I say full-time because I constantly have a lot of balls juggling all at once. But with that being said, I decided to launch my company officially, and, start to work under my company versus, these like one-offs where I was working for a different firm, and really haven't looked back from there. I've been able to align with some really incredible companies, and, they really embrace change, and they're excited about being able to do more and better for their employees. And what more can you ask for?
Right. That's wonderful. That's awesome. Good for you.
Thank you.
So, do you have employees for that?
So
Or
I
like,
work with consultants, kind of in a similar model, very familiar with consultancy and independent contractor phase. So really it's
okay.
based off the project. And what I do is I bring people on based off the company's need. So sometimes they need trainers or instructional designers that create the training. Sometimes they
Gotcha.
need graphic designers to create really robust campaigns. And where I come in as kind of making those recommendations. Sometimes they have in-house people that I partner with, and other times they're like, I'm at full capacity. Can you help us bring this person or that person in?
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So that's awesome. So you said you're juggling a lot of different things with the magazines, with your consulting, with Wonderlane. Would you say that consulting is more of your primary, or is the Send Media more of like your primary thing that you do more?
It really depends on the day. They are both my passions, and, my loves, and they will both succeed. If I keep focus, and keep applying the things that I want to do to scale and grow. So there's really not one in particular that the scale tips towards. Some things just require more attention on a
Mm,
day-to-day basis. So it's a constant review of my to-do list and my priority list. Naturally, when some of my clients are, under the gun of, a go live date, or
yeah.
a particular deadline, then I shift focus. But like anything, the magazines, those are deadlines too. And
Mm-hmm.
we put out multiple issues. So there's 2 issues every month that come out, and those require hard deadlines. Otherwise,
Yeah.
none of it happens.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about your magazine
Sure.
now. How did you get into that, and what does that look like?
Sure. So I think I mentioned that my degree's in journalism. So I originally focused on broadcast journalism. And, as a college student, I really wanted to make sure that I was building my resume from day one. And I was fortunate to go to Columbia in Chicago, and they kind of fill your cup with that sort of thought process. Build your resume, do projects while you're in school to showcase your work. And it was kind of drilled into my mind of how can I do this. So I started looking at opportunities to freelance write. And it
Yeah.
just so happened that in my own backyard, so to speak, there were a couple publications that were willing to take on a student freelance writer. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. I really like this. I had really good editors who were kind and thoughtful, and they were just redlining my work and calling it a day. They were really understanding that I was just starting out. And then flash forward after graduation and working in communications, I was kind of chomping at the bit to get back to more of the journalism base. And so I just started putting feelers out to freelance. And at the time, there was a local publication that was just starting up. And this particular woman was not from the area, transplant from somewhere else due to her husband's job. And so she was, same thing, journalism background, TV background, new mom who was just looking at starting something, creating her own community. And so I reached out to her. At the time, I had no kids, and I was like, hey, I'm not a mom, but I see your magazine and it's pretty cool. Do you think you could ever consider someone who's not a mom who just wants to freelance write? Or can I pitch you ideas for content? And we met for coffee, and kind of, as they say, the rest is history. And I think for me, I don't typically just take the assignment and go on. I was like, hey, can I do this for you? Could I maybe do some ad sales? I'd like to understand that side of the business. What do you think about if we did some things more digitally? What do you think if we built social media? Like, what if? And
Mhm.
over time, I realized that we were not missing stories, but it only could fit into this parenting mom niche. I knew there were stories that we were passing up. So it was
Yeah.
probably a 2-year conversation that we kept trying to figure out: do we create a standalone publication? Do we create an insert? Do we make exceptions? And then finally, woman to woman, it sort of fell out of the sky of ideas, and we're like, yes, this makes sense. Let's have a sister publication. We already know what works. And that's when I became publisher of that particular publication and had ownership in that magazine. And then Stephanie is the name of the original starter of Mom to Mom. And eventually life took her in a different path. And she had this opportunity for a job that just checked all the boxes for her.
Yeah.
And she really wanted to see what she could do with it. And so we had a conversation of, what if I took over Mom to Mom? What would that look like? And could she sort of take a step back and become more of an advisor, a silent partner? And so I took on ownership of Mom to Mom, became the publisher of that publication as well. And we were like, okay, let's really flip the script and create a media company, and keep the doors of opportunity open if we ever want additional titles or we want to grow in different ways. Create this sort of umbrella for
Yeah.
for the magazines to live underneath that. And long-winded way of saying, I just kept asking questions and kept trying to do other things to stretch myself and learn more. And it paid off in a tremendous way. Mom to Mom was always sort of heartfelt, and I felt strongly about. I didn't have quite the connection to it just because I wasn't a parent at the time. I had a good pulse on things, and
Yeah.
I would keep my ears open and reach out to friends and different groups to find out what people were concerned about. Woman to Woman, was my baby. I had no children at the time, and then now that I am a mom, it just has blossomed that much more.
Yeah, I love that. So, you had mentioned a digital front, and I know that the magazine is also digital. So, can you tell us a little bit about like what are your like I'd say the next 1 to 3 year plans
Sure.
with the magazines, and what are your plans moving forward to kind of grow those?
So I've always said that the publications are rooted in Northwest Indiana because it happened to be where we are, we being myself and Stephanie. And it's not a knock to the fact that that's where we are. It's a beautiful thing and it was welcomed so wonderfully. But I think for me, when I think about the content that we're putting out, I fall back on this tagline, real, relatable content. And it's something that's sort of played over and over in my head every time that we put out an issue, whether that be digital or print. And I think that if you were to take either of the publications, print or digital, and you lift them up and you place them anywhere in the country, they resonate with people.
Mm-hmm.
People have this similar journey when it comes to parenthood, or they can at least look at someone and say, I get it. I've been in the trenches there, or I know someone who went through something like that, or maybe they will eventually go through something like that. And it becomes this wonderful resource. And when you look at Woman to Woman, we've always tried to put out these stories that talk about triumphs over adversity or a really unique way of approaching a particular time in life. And I think people can look at that, and whether they may not have that same storyline, they can empathize or they can be inspired by. And I think that's where I see the growth potential, whether that be in a year or 3 years. Digital came to the forefront, and I'll be honest, it was really our advertisers that were like, hey, we want a bigger digital presence, but we want a digital presence with you. What can you
Yeah.
do for us? And it was one of those things that was stewing in the back of my mind, and I was like, okay, we need to prioritize this. We need to listen to our advertisers. This is what they want. So we looked at different ways that we could bring the magazine digitally. It helps us reach people in a different way. Some people just aren't in our distribution area, so it's convenience, it's access. And then when I look at print, it's the same sort of model. What we are doing right now is piloting some other markets in Chicagoland and down into Indianapolis, and those will sort of be our test as we sort of move our radius out further and further. But with all that being said, I think, for us, it's about continuing, to localize things, but also knowing that there is this opportunity to create this mass community, sort of one area at a time.
Yeah. So it's your print magazine. It's free, right? Can
Yes,
you tell us a little bit about how you distribute it,
sure.
and how many do you print, and are you able to get feedback from those in print readers on if they like it?
Mhm.
And I know this is kind of a secondary question, but how do you figure out the business people or the moms or the women that you're going to feature your
Sure.
articles about? Like, how do you find them?
So I'll start with the distribution. Some of it is inherited from the work that was done before me, and some of it is just growth and finding out where we know our target audience is for our advertisers, and we try to be in places that we know get a fair amount of foot traffic. While we have some smaller drop off locations through various partnerships, we really try to be in those places that we know those audiences are. So, it's going to be stores and libraries, doctors' offices. The beautiful thing of things like doctors' offices or those dental offices and things, people aren't oftentimes taking the magazine with them. So it's
Mm-hmm.
getting read over and over and over again all throughout the day. And we get feedback from those offices, and they'll say, people are loving the publication. Some of them are like worn out because people are like reading them over and over. They'll even stock old issues and keep some of them on hand, which is really neat when people have been featured even like 3 months or 6 months ago. And then I'll see posts on Instagram. They're like, I was sitting at the dentist and here's my issue, and they get to like revisit and you feel that again. So we constantly are analyzing when our delivery goes out. I have a system with our delivery people, that they provide feedback, if we have anything left over. We recycle from, the true just recycling bin, but we oftentimes will move the magazine to other areas. It's okay if there's a little bit of runway. If it's an issue that's, say 1 month old, we'll move it somewhere else that we know that could be useful. We can
Yeah.
partner with our libraries and we can ask, would you like to stock, some back issues? So we always make sure that, the content is being viewed and used, and we'll move and massage accordingly. And that's probably how it'll be, for here on out. We'll always be analyzing where we're at and where we're distributing. We're always talking to companies and organizations and such, if they'd like to have a rack, or if they'd like us, to drop certain publications off. Eventually it'll be more like direct ship, to places, as it branches out, and they'll get their monthly issue direct to their door. And that sort of is another growth component, where we know that sometimes people just don't get out and they don't get to the store in time before the issue is gone, or it might be not their favorite store, or they didn't make it to the library this month, what have you. So we are looking at rolling out a subscription, which would be, a nominal fee for the convenience of it coming direct to your door. And I know that that's going to be a way for us to hit other counties
Yeah.
in the Northwest Indiana footprint, and otherwise, that we haven't been able to. And I think people will enjoy the convenience. It'll be something I hope they look forward to.
Yeah.
And to answer your other question, I think that's kind of how I've always found content, something that people look forward to. Back to that real relatable tagline that I mentioned. I'm constantly scouring social media groups, reading different articles, figuring out what's at the heart of what people are thinking about, concerned about. When people post about things and share things about their lives, I will oftentimes end up in their DMs and say, hey, I really like what you shared. Would you like to write a story for us? Would you like to be featured? And, fostering those relationships, and figuring out, how we can plug people into the magazine. And sometimes that one question, they'll open up and they'll talk about an organization that they're launching, or a pilot project that they might be working on. And we figure out ways to plug them into the publications if they want to be a contributor as a writer, or, if they're possibly going to be a feature, say for a cover or otherwise. It's just a constant sort of flow of information. And we do get those people that are, that are fans, and they will make recommendations of people that they know, which is always wonderful. And that also helps us gauge what people are interested in as well. We do get fan mail, which is very bizarre, but very, very cool and very validating, of people
Yeah.
that will say how much they love the magazine, that they look forward to it, that they usually pick up an extra copy and share it with someone, or they'll pass theirs along to someone. And that's how we know that we're reaching so much more than sort of that flat number that we're printing, that it's being passed along. And we know that we're doing something right when we hear that.
That's awesome. So you had mentioned that you're a mom, and so can you tell us a little bit about the family dynamic
Sure.
and how you balance it all with being a mom? Because that's a lot.
I asked that question in a couple of our features, like, how do you balance it? Knowing that that's such a loaded question, and it's
It
not
is.
really true. There isn't any finite balance. It's all kind of crazy
Yeah.
in some of the best ways. But I think for me, I was doing all of this before I had kids, and my husband and I waited a long time to even try. We're high school sweethearts, and we wanted to sort of get our footing underneath us as best as we could. And I know what they say, you can never be totally prepared to have kids, but we were like, we want to just live a little bit. And before we started the call, I mentioned he went back to school, and we kind of came out of college during the recession, and it was like, let's just figure out us. Like, yes, we've been together for a long time, but we're still young and we're still growing. And we got married in our early 20s, and so that's what we did. And I started kind of picking up this freelancing work, doing some consulting, and I was like, okay, if we're able to have kids, this could work. Like, I could have it all, as cocky as that sounds. And I was
I
like,
have it all too. I totally get it.
so you're like, I can have these businesses and have a family and have a presence and make my own schedule and kind of be in all these worlds. And so when we did decide, like, hey, we're as ready as we're ever going to be, like, we should probably see if this is in the cards for us. And lo and behold, we end up with surprise, spontaneous, identical twins. So we were like, okay,
Surprise.
we are jumping right into parenthood. And just before we could, kind of fully come up for air, we were like, let's have another. It's just like, I don't know what kind of Kool-Aid
Baby
we're
fever.
drinking. So we threw a baby into the mix. And so they're just about 2 years apart, a little over. And say all that to say, there are some days that they just need me more. A flu
Mm-hmm.
bug hit our house a couple months ago, and it was like, there is nothing else right now. There is
Mm-hmm.
nothing else but taking care of them and sanitizing my house and hoping beyond hope that I don't get this as bad as they have it.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are some days where they go to school and they say, Mama, what are you doing today? And I'm like, oh, I have work calls, or I need to send some emails. And they don't know exactly what that means right now, but they will eventually. And they have this
Mm-hmm.
little nook under our stairs that we kind of created. We call it their clubhouse. And it has books and, like a little comfort spot. And maybe it's narcissistic, but I put the magazine in it for them, some back issues, and I want them to see the things that I create and the things that I do. The consulting, they don't understand fully
Yeah.
right now. They know I talk to people and I help people through challenges, but the magazine is something they can hold in their hands, and they can see that when I'm on my computer and I'm doing something, that's what I'm creating. And I hope someday that if they want nothing to do with any of the businesses that I'm creating, that's fine. Certainly, will be opportunities for them to learn if they do have a desire. But I just want them to see that if they have an idea or something that's just pulling at their hearts, that they can try it, and they can see what it means, and they can slowly pull back at what their dreams can become, because none of what I'm doing was what I set out to do. From the change management aspect of things to the magazines, it was all little tidbits of my life and interests, and saying, I think there's something there. I think I like this, and
Yeah.
exploring it. And I just want them to be able to see that all the time. And it's working in the margins of the day too. My hours are weird. I work all the time. When I say all the time, not overlaying the time with them, but really about picking up my computer when they go to bed, or if someone does sleep in, like
Mm-hmm.
checking something or writing out to that to-do list, and just making it happen, because I know they're not going to be little forever, but I also don't want to completely back burner all the things that I've worked towards. And I know that it'll just ebb and flow. And some days will be bonkers, and there will be certain times of the month that will be absolutely bananas, and deadlines and things like that. And, you pepper in all the activities that kids get involved in down the road. We'll just figure it out. Thankfully, I have an amazing partner in life who gets it. He gets my, like, rolling over at 10:30 at night. I'm like, hey, I have this idea. He's like, okay. But no, I mean, he welcomes it. He pokes holes at things, and I mean, I feel like that's why he does what he does too. Because one day we were like, okay, let's stop the nonsense, go back to school, do the things that you love, or what you think you love, and just make it happen. And with that being said, I think all things are possible when you can do that, and can ride the waves together.
I love that. I love that. Your kids are very lucky to
Oh,
have
thank
you,
you.
and that you're building that for them. And I think that that's kind of the goal, at least for me, and what I do and what I teach and what I help moms do, is that you can have all of that if you want it, just like you said. And I'm also lucky. I married my high school sweetheart, and I watched him get to pursue his dreams of being a firefighter and an instructor. And he does all of the things. He's super crazy with his work, like I am. And so, but it's his passion. And I love seeing
That's
him
awesome.
be able to be passionate about something, because what he was doing before this is like a second career. He was in a career and he wasn't passionate about it, and it drained him, whereas this fuels him. And I love that for anybody who has that ability to do
Absolutely.
that. So,
Sometimes people get hung up on the point A to Z. Like I think I want what's over there, but like sometimes it just takes like a little step or a little try here and there. And I think as parents it can be really scary to take those chances because you, especially if you have stability, or at
yeah.
least some semblance of stability, partner or not. And I think I've witnessed in what I do talking to people who just chip away at a little bit of a passion or an interest, and you'd figure out how to make it happen. And we don't all have the ability to jump all in and say, I'm going to do this full
Hmm.
time and this is going to be my sole focus because life is happening. But I
Yeah.
think even those little efforts are wonderful, if that's all that you can do. And there's something to all that you can do. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be successful. It just may take a little bit longer.
Yeah. It's all in the baby steps.
Absolutely.
So, moving on to your third ball, let's talk a little bit about Wonder Lane and your role with that business.
Sure. It's again one of those little conversations where I met Ashley through another contact, and she was so open and just forthright with her journey and her struggles. And I was like, I this person is I like this person. You don't often meet people who are not trying to play at something or trying to put on their best show. And she was just different, and not and I'll say it in a sense of like, certainly when you first meet someone you don't necessarily want to know all of their baggage, where you're just like, that's interesting. It wasn't like that. It was
Hmm.
just open and honest and real. And we just kept chatting after we featured her. So she, as I said, she was putting on a different event at the time, and she shared her journey with us, some struggles that she had experienced. And I just kept the lines of communication open, and I was like, hey, if you ever want to chat more about the magazine, maybe there's something here for us. And we just kept this text thread going back and forth. And one day it was a situation where I was like, well, I want to grow the magazine. I know that one of the ways to do that are events. And
Hmm.
I don't want to put on our own events. I don't want to get into that space. I think it could
Yeah.
be all encompassing, all consuming. It's like, what if we became like the premier media partner and we figure out a way to sort of do the work, together, and figure out a way to sort of volley the benefits back and forth. And so eventually we figured out a way to make that happen. So we rebranded to Wonder Lane Events.
Hmm.
And Ashley is, like you said, she's just such a dynamic person. She just started going full tilt and, doing outreach and making connections. And, for me, I came in as more of the business acumen, the logistics, the structure, and making sure that, we have our checks and balances in place. And, we're really operating as the company that I know we will be from day one. And, now we are getting ready to host an event partnered with Taste of Randolph in Chicago, which is amazing. We wanted to break into Chicago, and what better way than to kind of come on the heels of a successful event and manage their kids zone and create this really unique experience for people that were already going to be there. And
Hmm.
I love that Taste of Randolph and the team that's putting it on was like, if we can get families to stay and stay longer, like, we're in it. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to give them this little nook in this big festival that is just for families, and that will have different resources and different activations and really cool things that they'll get to experience by attending that event. And then we're keeping our flagship event in Valparaiso, Indiana, at Sunset Hill County Park. And
Hmm.
it's an amazing space that is just massive, and all these acres and trails. There's actual animals that just live there,
Hmm.
and there's a park. So even if you were just attending it to go to the park, it's wonderful. But we're going
Yeah.
to interject all of the energy that is Wonder Lane there, and have this amazing event in August. And really, what I hope to just bring to the table is, just this learned business sense. I really think that Ashley is phenomenal with partnerships and color and pop and
The
sparkle. Where
vision.
I'm like, where I come in and I'm like very black and white, and I'm like, okay, here's our list, here's our checklist. And I'm like talking about, LLCs and EIN numbers and do we want to be on QuickBooks just yet? And I'm like, I'm probably like boring her to tears. But at the end of the day, I hope that helps us scale, in a smart way, that we can be strategic, and that year over year we're just adding more locations, because just like the magazines and consulting, this particular fest and this particular, and the market can go anywhere. And I don't say that lightly. I know that families are clamoring for events that think about them, that think about things like, my kid is hot and tired and they want to go home. Let's have a little nook where you can go and relax and just take a minute, have the snack, drink your juice box, and then they're like raring to go. And you don't have to run home and end the day. You can continue to have this like wonderful family outing, but it's that kind of stuff that we're thinking about.
Yeah.
And that's why it was a no-brainer to me to figure this partnership out, and to continue, these conversations via text in odd hours, because she has kids too, and to finally put it down on paper and make it happen, because I know, certainly it's good for the businesses that I already had, but I also, want to be part of things like this that just feel good and bring more vibrancy into people's lives.
I feel like Disney needs something like that.
Right.
I was like, when we went to Disney, my kids got so hot and grumpy, and like, we didn't want to take them home, but they needed rest,
Right.
Like Disney, we partner with Disney.
Right. And it's just little things like that where they probably didn't want to go home either, and
Yeah.
but you just like, when your child is throwing themselves on the ground, what more can you do? And I
Right.
think what's really cool when we think about those kinds of things, but it's all the people that want to be part of it too, that want to showcase their little corner of the world, whether it's something that they create or something that they provide. They want to bring that to families. And we just opened up applications for the events, and we're almost sold out in less than 24 hours. And
Mm-hmm.
that in and of itself was a little shocking to me, from the standpoint that I didn't get to see that last time because I wasn't part of it. But to be part
Yeah.
of it now and to see how much people want to be part of it, I cannot wait for ticket sales. I'm like, okay, I know we can't open up ticket sales at the tail
Right.
end of winter for a summer event, but I really, really want to because I know people, it was so exciting to see. And it was this roller coaster of emotions to see it kind of come to fruition after so many months of talking and putting these wheels in motion.
I know that Wonderland is going to be huge. Huge. It's like you said, it's something different, something that people want and need, and it's something that you don't really see around here. So
I,
it's gonna be phenomenal.
and I know there's,
Um,
big cities certainly, put on some phenomenal things, and I hope that we can partner with some of those bigger cities, and tap into the wonderful things that they're already doing and just give it the Wonderlane effect. But I will not take credit for this one.
no.
Ashley had, the thought and the wherewithal to do all of these things. Like I said, she brings this sparkle and color, and I am just happy to lay down the foundation for her to build on, and to be a team together.
Yeah. She's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So if you guys haven't listened to her episode, go back and listen to it. You won't regret it. Just a few more things here
Yeah,
before we
absolutely.
finish up because I really enjoy talking with you, but I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Oh no,
So, what if you were to give the listeners any, how do we look up your magazine? What do you want them to know? How can they reach out to you
yeah,
if they
absolutely.
they want to be an advertiser or if maybe they have some ideas as far as women who could be featured? And I could put all those links in the description too, but where should
Sure.
people go to find you?
We are on social media on Facebook and Instagram. So it's mom-to-mom.connect, woman-to-woman.connect for Instagram. There
Mm-hmm.
is Mom to Mom Mag for Facebook, Woman to Woman Mag for Facebook, and then Send Media Company LLC is our website, where you can kind of flip through the magazines. You get a little bit of a flavor of some of the articles and things. It'll tell you a little bit more about some of our contributors, as well as our backstory. And then, of course, if there's things that you have in mind, whether that be advertising, partnership, etc., any platform, just reach out. We'll find your message and get back to you, as soon as we can, and hopefully create something spectacular together. And then if it's something that's more general business, I am on LinkedIn. I love to have LinkedIn type conversations and connect with people. It's a great way for a business related conversation, especially as it pertains to consulting. Happy to have those dialogues as well.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, and I'll put that in the description too. One, I guess I would say one or two last things that I've started to ask
Sure.
most of my podcast guests, and something that I've just been told that they're good questions. And so one of them is, what is the best advice a mentor has ever given you?
I've been thinking a lot about mentors lately, and I think it's because I'm at a stage in my career where I want someone new. And I think it's not necessarily like one bit of advice. I mentioned someone early on during this call, and I think that particular mentor just kept throwing things at me. And it was just food for thought. Like, what if you do this? What if you do that? If you want to grow with the company, do you think this particular role would be right for you? I think the fact that he understood, that my mind was working that way, and didn't feel the need to talk me into staying helped me realize faster that I was heading down the right path. I think I would have always moved on. There's certainly nothing holding me there per se, but it just fostered that feeling sooner. And
Yeah.
I think, if I had to have a mentee, or if I have that opportunity to mentor someone, I would hope that I would do the same thing, that I would constantly ask the next question. What's the next right step? What's the next move? And continue that ball of momentum.
Yeah. Always have a plan of
Yeah,
attack.
it just I would certainly hope to inspire that same thought process, and get someone thinking about where they could go, and what they could be.
Are you a reader? And if so, what books have you read that I should read?
Mm. Oh my gosh, I used to be like stack of books, go to the library weekly. I was, always someone who, had, something, that I was trying to read. Here lately, if I'm being totally honest, I'm like, read a chapter and then all of a sudden my eyelids are going. Right now, oh, I just finished Late to the Game. What is that? The Nightingale, which was phenomenal. A book that made me cry, which I have not cried over reading a book in some time. And then I just picked up, I'm going to forget the title. I just picked up a new one, like Woman Down. That's what it is. And I saw it when I was walking through Target, and like the color caught my attention, read the back of it. And I was like, I'm definitely going to put this in the queue. So that one's my next one up. Not super exciting in terms of like reading something that's like business focused or business minded. I feel like reading for me, because I do so much of it with what I do, needs to be a little bit bubblegum for the brain. I just need that in my life right now. So even if I only make it a chapter at a time and it's slow going, just something that's a little escapism,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit romantic, maybe something historical that's just going to make me swoon, or, maybe cry, but just something to get my mind off of, all the different business ideas that I keep, that I keep doing, and keep populating, or my to-do list. So that's kind of
Yeah.
where I'm focused. I'm looking over right now because I'm sitting in my office. So I have my bookshelves, and I think the next one up after I get to Woman Down will be I reread a book probably every year, and that's Briar Rose. It was something that it's a period piece, nonfiction, super easy, like can read it in like 2 days. But I think it was high school reading assignment, and I love it, and I feel like I need to revisit that book because
Yeah.
it's like a little bit romantic, has a set in World War II, but also very very dark, and uncovers stories. And I think that's another part of tapping into my interests about unearthing stories and finding out more about a particular character. So that was a very long way of saying that, but yeah, bubblegum for the brain is where I gravitate towards when it comes to books.
Yeah, that's so funny that you just said that because I was literally talking to a friend of mine right before we recorded this, and I was talking about books. I've always been an avid reader. In high school, it was always fiction, but then when I became a mom, or right around the time I became a mom, I like got zoned in on like all educational, business,
Oh
self-help
yeah,
books.
absolutely.
And I did not read for fiction for the longest time. And I was like telling myself, no, I'm not going to read fiction anymore. I want to be useful. I want to. And then I realized like I don't have an escape for like anything.
Right.
Like I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do things that most people do to escape. And I was just telling my friend because I have another friend who just got me into fiction and she's got me reading the Fourth Wing series.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, this is my escape. I like didn't do it for so long, but I was like, I go into this little world that's not real,
Yeah.
and I was like, this is it. I found my escape in something that I love. But that's just kind of funny that you said that because I literally just had that conversation with her like right before we got on.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate this so much. This was super fun. It's nice to reflect some days when you're like in the throes of it all, and think back as to why and when and how. And it's fun to be able to shine a little light on some of the people that made it happen.
Well, I'm excited to just watch in the future and your journey and your businesses and
Thank
see where they
you.
take you. So I will let you get to your day, but thank you so much
Sure.
for being on and
My
spending some
pleasure.
time with us.
Off to Carline.
Ooh, fun.
Have a good one. Thank you so much.